Many people consider the Gilded Age to be the pinnacle of American history. It was a period marked by the industrialized economy's ascent following the Civil War, when American commerce flourished greatly and some well-known executives amassed enormous fortune. Though the Gilded Age is seen as a period of immense wealth, it was also marked by significant corruption and inequality. Even the term the Gilded Age came from a satirical novel written by Mark Twain and released in 1873. It's meant to suggest that anything that seems to be corrupt on the outside might not be on the inside. Don't forget to subscribe to Ancient History for fascinating insights into the mysteries of the ancient world and captivating historical narratives. The United States experienced a massive economic boom shortly after the American Civil War ended in 1865, fueled by a wave of industrialization brought about by the newfound calm. The affluent era between 1870 to 1900, which coincides with the latter half of the Reconstruction, is typically referred to as the Gilded Age. The Civil War brought about significant improvements to the United States, such as widespread use of the telegraph and the significant growth of the railroads, although also having some disastrous impacts on the country. America also entered a phase of significant economic expansion shortly after the war's conclusion. Although the industrial era had started in Great Britain in the 18th century, the late 19th century saw the greatest industrial development in America. In many respects, America's remarkable economic boom was always inevitable given its wealth of natural resources, such as coal and oil, as well as its abundance of important agricultural products. Actually, a tidal surge of foreign capital flooded into the United States after the war because many European investors thought it would be a wise place to do business. America saw one of its largest ever migratory waves, which more than doubled the country's population in addition to drawing in investors. The majority of Americans were originally from England, Scotland, and Wales up until this point, but a large number of immigrants from other parts of the world arrived in the late 19th century, creating a far more diversified country. The United States grew significantly more urban as a result of an increase in tourists and the growth of various businesses, with numerous towns and cities spreading throughout the country. Skylines started to rise steadily during this period, which also saw the construction of the first skyscrapers in history. Because of its numerous commercial ports, the East Coast prospered in particular, and the Great Lakes region served as the industrial boom's central hub. One of the great cities of the era, Chicago, attracted tourists from all over the world in addition to becoming a significant railroad center. New industries gave rise to cities, and the Gilded Age is renowned for some of its most significant industrialists, many of whom attained extraordinary fortune during this period. The late 19th century was known as the Age of Capital, when affluent persons made significant investments in large-scale companies and saw enormous returns. This led to the rise in prominence of private corporations. The United States developed a strong capitalist drive early in its history, since the American colonies themselves were partly created by private businesses that raised money from their investors. Throughout the 19th century, the US government persisted in taking a pro-business attitude, enabling private enterprises to build the significant infrastructure projects that the country required. It's common knowledge that the presidents of the Gilded Age were astonishingly forgettable because, for the most part, they adopted an indifferent style of leadership. America quickly rose to prominence as the world's leading capitalist nation, as industrialization created a great deal more opportunity for these types of private enterprises. One drawback of this economic growth was that most of the competition was typically acquired by the few individuals with the capital to participate in large-scale businesses. The spirit of healthy competition was soon undermined as several sizable monopolies arose. Among these massive monopolies, the Carnegie Steel, the Vanderbilt Railroad, and the Rockefeller oil monopolies are the most well-known and infamous. Afterwards, Carnegie Steel changed its name to J.P. Morgan Steel, named after the well-known financier, and for $480 million, Morgan bought out Carnegie. One of the most well-known moneymen of the robber barons Gilded era, J.P. Morgan was a wealthy banker who contributed to New York's extreme prosperity by investing in American companies. While many still view these wealthy merchants as captains of industry or great American heroes, some refer to these titans of industry in less positive terms, calling them the robber barons of the Gilded Age. Even though some of these tycoons, like Andrew Carnegie, spent millions on charitable endeavors, the majority of robber barons were notoriously cruel and dishonest. For instance, the well-known Wall Street and railroad magnate James Fisk engaged in a number of dubious activities, such as bribery, extortion, and dangerous market manipulation. Even though the Sherman Antitrust Act was implemented by 1890 in an effort to outlaw the risky monopolies that these merchants had amassed, the act had minimal impact on the monopolies that were already in place. Not until 1901, toward the close of the Gilded Age, did Teddy Roosevelt win the presidency, ending the robber barons' influence, if not completely. During his lifetime, Cornelius Vanderbilt was one of the most well-known tycoons, while being despised by many for his shrewd business tactics. Because he was a key player in the massive growth of the railroad industry in the United States, Vanderbilt is significant. The railway experienced its heyday during the Gilded Age, when trains were the most expedient means of transporting products over vast distances. The Transcontinental Railroad, which connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans for the first time, was revolutionary in the United States. Vanderbilt was already extremely wealthy when he entered the railroad sector, but in order to acquire as much rail track as possible, he sold his prior companies. Because there were so few train tracks in any given area, the railroads were especially susceptible to monopolistic takeover. In no time, Vanderbilt would be able to demand outrageous prices from his clients, knowing that they would be forced to utilize his companies to ship their goods. Farmers, united under the banner of the Granger movement, pushed for more equitable prices in reaction to the outrageous fees levied by numerous railroad corporations. The Granger Union would have an unexpectedly significant legacy since they served as a catalyst for the progressive political movements that pushed for more economic equality and more equitable economic conditions, namely the People's Party and the Greenback Party. During the Gilded Age, economic inequality was a popular topic. Progressive labor movements emerged in the late 19th century and expanded throughout the industrialized world in an effort to provide common people with safer working conditions, higher pay, and more equitable working hours in factories that frequently employed hazardous machinery. Regretfully, a growing number of affluent Americans adopted the doctrine of social Darwinism, an ideology that maintains that impoverished individuals should remain impoverished due to their inherent inferiority. Tycoons rarely provided assistance to their employees, frequently requiring them to put in extra overtime in order to boost productivity and enhance profits. Many American workers created unions in reaction to their conditions getting worse. The American Federation of Labor was established in 1886 to facilitate the organization of these unions. Some workers adopted a more radical stance, becoming members of more socialist organizations and even leaning toward anarchy. Little was done to remedy the situation by the US government, which kept blocking laws intended to enhance working conditions. During the Gilded Age, tensions between employers and employees resulted in a number of significant catastrophes. The Chicago Haymarket Riot of 1886 resulted in several fatalities as the workers' nonviolent protest descended into violence. During the event, an unnamed attacker attempted to strike a police officer by throwing a stick of dynamite into the crowd. There was a shooting incident that claimed numerous police officers and citizens' lives. A comparable incident happened in Pittsburgh in 1892, a few years later. A mob of Carnegie Steel employees and a detachment of private militiamen from the Pinkerton Agency, who had been hired to control the crowds, clashed during the so-called Homestead Strike. An angry anarchist came dangerously close to killing Henry Frick, the despised businessman who vehemently opposed the unions during the riots. The Gilded Age was not only characterized by economic inequality and corruption, but also by significant challenges in race relations. Native Americans faced tremendous hardship during this period, with conflicts such as the Dakota Gold Rush of 1876 leading to violent clashes with the US government and resulting in extensive campaigns against Native American nations. 10 years later, in 1886, the last major resistance force led by Geronimo of the Apache was finally defeated. marking the end of an era for many indigenous peoples. Amidst these social and economic challenges, the political landscape of the Gilded Age was characterized by corruption and the rise of political machines. Organizations like Tammany Hall in New York City thrived on patronage and bribery, manipulating elections and exploiting immigrant communities for political gain. While these machines provided opportunities for poorer citizens, they also perpetuated corruption and undermined democratic principles. That's all for this video. We'll be back soon with another informative video. Don't forget to like and share this video. To keep exploring ancient history together, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Until next time,